Talk about the future, and you don't want to miss any of this. And we'll be right back. Okay, and we're back talking with George Buer and Clif. Hi. All right, gentlemen, George is the economist here, and let's just do a little bit background, if we can, a little on your experience for our listeners, and we'll get into this whole thing of how you two work together and what you're doing.
Oh, it's really strange. The real short version of it, Jeff, is when I was in high school, I fell in love with electronics, became a broadcast engineer, newscaster at age 21, big city news director at 23. Did that till 1983 or so.
Wow.
Did a turnaround as vice president of a small international airline down in the Caribbean, Cayman Airways. Built a broadcasting college, took some paramilitary single-sideband radio equipment to market. The list goes on and on. I was with a company called Cruising Equipment. We did battery instrumentation on everything from race around the world sailboats to electronics in the U-2000, which was the updated version of the U-2 spy plane. And besides that, software company turnaround a couple of years ago, built a 96-track recording studio in L.A., living on a ranch kind of out here in the outback of East Texas, master's in business, a couple of 4 patents I'm a co-holder on. That's about it. Pretty boring life.
That's a great screenplay or two right there. That's,
and oh, by the way, lived on a sailboat for 10 years, and in our backyard, in our lower part of our property, we had a tornado touchdown last night. So
last night?
Yeah, you know all that stuff that went through Dallas? We lost 24 trees, including probably 24 oak trees that you can't get your arms around. They're that big.
Geez. Wow.
And you know,
don't take it personally now. Don't take it personally.
George kind of does, though. You have to understand his life in terms of a much more archetypical view of the world, which is kind of where I come in. George has this thing going with earth, wind, fire, and water elements. And for a while he was on the sailboat, lived in and immersed himself in water for 10 years, as he said. And then coincidentally, as he's getting away from the water world, what happens but the house that he's living in Florida, wasn't it, George, that had the 30-foot geyser of flame?
Yeah, it was a 2.5-inch high-pressure gas line. We were leasing this house, right? And we came home one night, and it wasn't 30-foot, Clif. It was like 65 feet. What had happened is lightning had hit, come down a power line at the neighbor's place, touched off this gas leak, and it's like coming home to a hell of a Burnzo torch.
That's
and the
amazing.
Whole neighborhood.
That's
And the funny part of all this is my whole family is firefighters, right? Fire chiefs, captains, regular rank-and-file firefighters, and co-inventors of the medic.
Well, at least the blowtorch wasn't coming up through your living room when you got home.
Well, but Clif's right. I mean, it's all about, and it's that way with everybody, but it doesn't slap everybody around like it does me.
Which may be an indication that universe thinks George is a bit dense and has to get his attention, because it went on later.
I am.
It went on later to burn his house down and total that.
Now wait a minute. State. You did lose your house later on?
Well, what was again universe?
And with all those firefighters, no one came to your aid.
Well, we had decided to leave our home in Florida and buy this place sight unseen in Texas. And my brother-in-law came up here.
Sight unseen. Now, you sound like an intelligent man.
Oh, and it worked out great. I mean, it's a beautiful place.
Okay.
But my brother-in-law came up here, and we were moving up. We had left, like, Jacksonville, Mississippi, and we had a moving truck behind us, and my brother-in-law calls me on the phone and says, "Oh, your house had a fire last night." I'm going, come on now. Come on, Stanley, we're only 2 hours away on the freeway. You're joking, right? No, I'm not. Or what?
So George has this issue with the elementals, and apparently
I do. I mean, I'm an elemental victim.
Yep.
That's very funny. I'm sorry, but it is funny. There's some irony and humor, and there it is.
Well, and we lived in the shop building on the ranch for 3 months while we rebuilt the house.
Well, okay. So you recovered.
Yeah.
Oh, sure,
yeah,
sure.
And my point for bringing it up is that that's kind of how, to a certain extent, how I got to know George was I was doing this research on archetypical language throughout the Internet as a bit of research, because I had this theory that all humans are psychic to some degree, and that it leaks out all the time, and that a good place to catch it would be in the changes in the way in which they use their daily lexicon online. And George's site, urbansurvival.com, which was centered on economics and still is, was so archetypically pure that I started reading it as opposed to these many other, quite actually millions of sites that I had my software going and perusing. Most of them are just eaten up and aggregated, but George's site, like I say, was archetypically pure. And so I excluded it from the research I was doing and just started reading it every day.
All right, hang on. We're going to come back and talk about...
It's strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. We're going to talk about Clif's background. Now, it's funny, George, being a broadcast engineer and a television, I guess, a radio news director and so forth, understanding voice. I mean, does Clif have the ultimate radio voice, or what?
He does, and he doesn't know it.
Well, let's not tell him. We don't want him to get a big head.
No. He'll be on Oprah or something.
That's right. Back in a minute, we'll find out some more about these two guys. And, again, urbansurvival.com is George's site, and between the two of them, they work halfpasthuman.com. Be right back. Okay, Jeff Rense back with Clif and George. George's background is, he's an economist, and I'm going to use that term with the kindest of intentions. He really is. He's a legitimate man of finance, of world trends, of all kinds of important things, and what's going on around us now is certainly no surprise to him. Now, on the other hand, Clif is a master computer programmer, truly a brilliant man in his own field. Used to work for that major company that doesn't make Macintosh computers, but we won't hold that against him because he left, and now he's doing. I was
actually a consultant, so I was never an employee. I've been an employee for a number of individuals, and probably a bad one for most. Good at what I do, but I don't like the constraints that are put on you as a workaday programmer. You know, the little cube world.
Yeah, constraints are that's a kind term. It's worse.
Clif is always looking for new vistas.
Yeah. Well, good. All right. Well, we've got a man who literally knows how to take the internet and apply intelligent data to it via software and come up with information that that is provocative, to say the least. Tell us again, if you would, Clif, how you stumbled into this, so to speak, where you began and where we are now and what you two are up to.
I had originally I'd done some work and gotten a few patents underway and some software and invented some interesting bits of software. And along about that time, I ran into a couple of interesting concepts about language that intrigued me. I'm self-educated, which can be good and can be bad. You have a tendency as such a person to ignore your schooling as a limitation on your education and to pursue things that are of interest. And, of course, you at times miss some of the fundamentals, and so there may be some holes. And I was sort of going back and filling in some holes on some linguistics, found some incredible connections, and took off with it. One of the things that occurred to me was at the time, this was back in 94, 95, that the stock market truly was being traded. In fact, nearly, as I could tell, most paper debt markets were being traded almost entirely on emotion, in spite of what what I term the rationalists would tell you. Now, George is a rationalist. He knows there's emotion involved, but he also says that there's these cycles that control the movement based on fundamentals and so on and so on. And my point was that at that time I could see that there were clearly instances where you could just shout balderdash and say that's 100% emotion that's causing these kind of moves. And so I started pursuing the idea that, well, maybe one could capture the emotion that was pending, sort of little tiny little future looks in just a few days, so to speak, a little tiny window, if one were to haunt the various different places where economists like George would hang out and chat with each other. Sort of make sense?
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
And so I was out and about hunting for information, and I just chose as my target after I developed some software that would go out and munch great numbers of web pages and condense them down for me. The software is written in a combination of direct C and some Perl, and then I analyze all the resulting stuff in Prolog. Prolog's really interesting because it understands words, and it was designed to be used as an artificial intelligence programming language. And the version I use is pure Prolog, which is actually a rare commodity on PCs at the time, this being 94. I was using this thing out of London from LPA, Logic Programming Associates out of London. And they gave me some really interesting tips, and I started going out and about. And my target was Sun Computers, which is actually Stanford University Network. And I kept running into this, what I thought at the time, initially anyway, these rather annoying blockages by finding out that, yeah, I could get the emotions, but they were very extreme emotions, and they were actually about the sun, not Sun Computers, but the big scary ball in the sky. And so that got me thinking.